I don't want to watch your stupid video, just tell me what are the best tier 4 upgrades for the hero brawlers. Okay. Number 1 Miss Marvel passive, number 2 Captain Marvel ultimate, number 3 America Chavez passive, number 4 Captain Marvel passive, number 5 America Chavez special, number 6 Miss Marvel basic, and if you're running the Spider-Man variant, number 7 the Spider-Man passive. What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Orange Essentials. Today we're going to be taking a look, at long last, at the Hero Brawlers. So the Hero Brawlers are a very versatile team. I really like them. Essentially, you just need Miss Marvel and any 4 Hero Brawlers, and the team's going to do really well. Now, a lot of people tend to ask me what I think are the best 5 Hero Brawlers, and I don't really like to answer that question because I feel like it's kind of misleading. What I mean by that is you'd almost certainly want Ghost Rider on your best 5 Hero Brawlers team, but in practice there's no reason to ever do that. If you have Ghost Rider, he should be the centerpiece of a Supernatural team, because Miss Marvel and any 4 Hero Brawlers are going to do pretty well. In reality, I think this team functions amazingly well as a catch-all team for Blitz and War. What I mean by that is there are a lot of really good brawler characters that don't have a really strong home on other teams. For example, characters like Deadpool. For people not running the original Spider-Verse, not everyone has a really good place for Spider-Man or Miles Morales. If you don't have Phoenix, you may not have a really good home for Psylocke or Wolverine. And so the brawler team is just an excellent home for those characters, and it turns them into an immediately formidable sure-to-win Blitz team and threatening War team. Now, if you're a new enough player, a Hero Brawler team can actually be an arena team for you. If you're mostly running into Defenders teams, either a Hero Brawler team or a Hero Brawler hybrid can both score huge punch-ups on Defenders teams in arena, but beyond that, you're mainly looking at War and Blitz for this team. Having said that, I believe at the time this video is released there's like 15 Hero Brawler characters, and you'll notice they're not all on the infographic, firstly because it would make this video take forever, and secondly because a lot of them just pretty much should always be with their teammates. For example, Heimdall is a Hero Brawler, but he should pretty much always be with the Asgardians, so I tried to include the most common ones that people wouldn't have a home for, and that's what we're going to look at. One final disclaimer, the rankings for the abilities are based on being on the Hero Brawler team. So for example, Psylocke, we did go and break down her abilities in the Orange Essentials for X-Men, and you'll see some of the ratings are a little bit different because, for example, her ultimate removes all negative effects from X-Men allies, and while on an X-Men team, that's not half bad. On a Hero Brawler team, the maximum number of X-Men allies she should ever have is maybe 1 with Wolverine, so it's not quite as good. So you'll see characters here get different star ratings as a part of this team that they may have received as part of another team. But having said that, let's get into it. Alright, so first up, let's take a look at Spider-Man. So taking a look at Spider-Man's basic, adding tier 4s to Spider-Man's basic adds 50% damage to the primary and 10% chance for him to gain evade. Now, an important note, whenever you upgrade any character's basic, you're also upgrading their counter and assist. And so for Hero Brawlers, the fact that you're actually also upgrading all of their assists is slightly more impactful because at least once per turn when Miss Marvel goes, she's gonna call a Hero Brawler to assist her. But a lot of times the assist upgrades are not that big a deal. They're almost never functional, but it's definitely worth it to take a look, go to msf.gg and actually look at how it improves their counter and assist. It's not a 1-for-1. What I mean by that is while this upgrade adds 50% damage to Spider-Man's basic, it only adds 21% damage and then also 2% piercing to the assist. So, having said that, Spider-Man's basic, it's definitely strong. He has good base damage, an extra 50% is an above average upgrade, and the extra 10% chance to gain evade is really good. That said, it's not revolutionary, it's almost never going to win you the match by having this upgrade, so while I do think it's very strong, I don't think it's absolutely necessary, so for me, this is a 3-star. Alright, now we'll take a look at Spider-Man Special. So putting tier 4s in Spider-Man Special adds an extra 10% damage to the primary and adjacent targets, and it also changes the amount of people he chains to from 2 or 3 to guaranteed 3 targets to chain to. So that is pretty good. However, that means about half the time, the only difference you're going to see out of this upgrade is 10% more damage. And also, you're not always going to be in a situation where you can chain to everyone. Sometimes people are in stealth. I know that the ability can't be counterattacked, but for one reason or another, There may be reasons based on positioning, depending on what content you're using this team for. You're not always going to be able to get all this defense down, so it's undeniably a good upgrade. However, I don't think that it's absolutely critical to the team's success, especially when you typically run a character like Chavez who can cover and also apply defense downs. So for me, while I like this upgrade, I don't think it's necessary, and so it's just a 3-star. Alright, now we'll take a look at Spider-Man's ultimate. So when you put tier 4s in his ultimate, it adds 60% damage to the primary target. That's it. So that, again, is pretty good. He has very good base damage, and this is a really hard-hitting ability already. Giving it that extra oomph is definitely not bad. However, again, it's not revolutionary. It's not going to win you matches that you would otherwise lose. So while I think it is an above-average upgrade considering how much damage it adds to Spider-Man's nuke, for me, it's just a 3-star. Now let's take a look at Spider-Man's passive. So putting tier 4s in this ability does a couple things. It adds another 5% dodge chance, bringing him up to 25%, and it adds this line, on dodge, fills Spider-Man, Miles, and this character's speed bar by 10%. So I actually quite like this upgrade for a couple reasons. For one, the Hero Brawler team is pretty light on defense. They're pretty much everything into their opening barrage, and then beyond that, they don't have that much in the way of survivability except for Miss Marvel's taunt. And so I like that this gives you a better chance of keeping one of your Hero Brawlers alive, and Spider-Man in particular does really, really well as fights go later, so keeping him on the field is very, very good. However, the line that really sold this for me, if you're running the Spider-Man variant and if you're also running Miles, is that he can give them both speed bar on any dodge. So he has a good chance to gain an evade, which counts as a dodge when it's consumed, on his basic attack, and then he just has this innate chance to dodge right here. So because he can actually speed up himself and Miles, an early dodge can actually give Miles the speed bar he needs to get in and disrupt someone or to do a turn meter rewind on someone who is just about to use a big game-changing ability. So because a single Spider-Man dodge can put both Spider-Man or Miles ahead of another character with a big control ability, for me, this is a 4-star. Alright, now let's take a look at Miles Morales. So, looking at Miles' basic, if you put tier 4s in this ability, it increases the damage to the primary target by 40%. That's it, and that is such a standard basic attack, it is exactly a 2-star. Alright, now we'll take a look at Miles' special. So putting tier 4s on this ability adds 40% damage, and it changes it from applying a 1-turn slow to a 2-turn slow. So, that's certainly not a bad upgrade. However, there aren't a lot of instances where that slow lasting for 2 turns after being applied, typically on turn 2, sometimes on turn 1, is that revolutionary. So it can be very strong, but I don't run into a lot of instances where that ends up making all the difference. So for me, this is just a 3-star. Alright, now we'll take a look at Miles' ultimate. So putting tier 4s in Miles' ultimate adds 30% damage, and it applies Disrupted to 2 additional targets. So this is a very good upgrade, and every once in a while, a Disrupted is going to make a sizable difference in a match. However, because the target that's going to get this additional Disrupted is random, it can also be of almost no help whatsoever. So I do like this upgrade, and there will be some instances where this can be a game changer. It's definitely not a bad upgrade to put T4s in, but I don't find it as quite essential because it doesn't necessarily give you more control over what's happening in the match. So for me, this is a 3-star. Alright, finally, let's take a look at Miles' passive. So when you put tier 4s in Miles' passive, it adds a line saying that on turn, if it's going to apply defense down to a random target, if that target already has defense down, instead he's going to gain offense up. And so this upgrade in particular is not bad. As with pretty much all of Miles' abilities but his basic, you certainly could make the case for the T4s, and I don't think it's a waste of a T4 to invest in this ability. However, because again, it's kind of random which target he's going to choose, and then additionally, he's not really there for his high damage. If you're running Miles on the Hero Brawlers, you're using him for his controlling effects, and his damage is kind of secondary. So if he's hitting into someone that already would have defense down, not that he necessarily has to hit into that target, but it's probably a good idea, then a lot of times the offense up is not going to be the make or break amount of damage. So again, I don't think this is a bad upgrade. You could make the case for this being 4-star, but I haven't had it, and it has not stopped my hero brawlers from doing any of the things that I look to them to be able to do. So for that reason, for me, this is a 3-star. Now we'll take a look at Gamora. So taking a look at Gamora's basic, when you put tier 4s in Gamora's basic, it improves her chance to bonus attack 2 times from 40% to 50%. So interestingly, when you do the math on this ability, the extra 10% chance to bonus attack twice for 200%, it ends up being the exact amount of damage on average as a normal basic upgrade, which is 40%. So it's pretty standard. So for me, this is a 2-star. All right, now we'll take a look at Gamora's special. So adding T-Force to Gamora's special adds 40% damage to the primary and 20% damage to the secondary targets. So it's kind of important that she gets this upgrade because if she gets a kill, she can get the reset. However, it's only a 40% damage increase and it's only 20% to the adjacent target. So it's just such a small amount of damage that it's rare that this will be the difference between getting the kill or not getting the kill for the reset. So because it's so infrequently actually going to matter and it's not that much damage, for me, this is just a 2-star. All right, now we'll take a look at Gamora's ultimate. So putting tier 4s in Gamora's ultimate adds 50% damage to the ability. Now, because it's just a single target nuke, normally just a 50% damage upgrade and that's it. I would just give a 2-star and be done with it. However, there's a couple things about this that actually make it a little bit better. The first is she's going to gain offense up beforehand, so that 50% is actually 75%, which is not too shabby. And then if she gets a kill with this ability, she gets a reset. So that extra damage, if it's just enough to allow her to kill the target, which 75% certainly can be, especially considering she has a chance to crit as well, if that extra damage is enough, she will get an entire other turn, and I have won many Blitz matches and many war matches because Gamora was able to get a kill, and then she had offense up and had a very big next turn, maybe a 2 or 3 hit on a basic, and just did so much more damage than she would have done if she had just narrowly failed to kill the person the first time. So because this ability can be such a game changer, for me this is a 3-star. And finally, we're taking a look at Gamora's passive. Adding T-Force to Gamora's passive adds 5% crit chance, and that's it. And that is abysmal. 1 extra crit in 20 turns is not good. This is a 1-star. Don't get this. All right, now we're going to take a look at Deadpool. So putting tier 4s in Deadpool's basic adds 30% damage to the primary, and then 80% of the time you'll hit for that bonus attack, and it'll add 30% to that as well. So the fact that it's adding 60% is not bad, but because it's done as a bonus attack, it's going to hit into armor both times. So it's not that much extra damage considering it's an extra 30% twice, but it's hitting into armor both times. So for me, this is just a 2-star. All right, now we'll take a look at Deadpool's special. So when you put tier 4s in Deadpool's special, it adds 60% damage, and that's it. It's certainly not bad. 60% is a slightly above average amount of damage to gain for a big single target nuke, and if he gets the kill, he gets a regen stack, so it definitely helps to have that extra damage on an ability that very well may execute. However, although it's slightly above average, it's certainly not that critical, so for me, this is a 3-star. Alright, now we're going to take a look at Deadpool's ultimate. So putting tier 4s in Deadpool's ultimate adds 30% damage to the primary target, and then it adds 40% damage to each target of the chain, which is potentially a rebound chain. And I'm kind of torn on this ability because the actual raw amount of damage that you gain from this for the upgrade is certainly above average. However, a lot of times you open with this ability and then it's pretty uncommon with the Brawler team that the fight is still going by the time this ability comes back around, although Miss Marvel's AoE can give him ability energy, so sometimes it comes up, but a lot of times you end up having killed certain people and there isn't even room to chain, so even when this ability is available, you don't necessarily use it, and because it's a lot of bonus attacks, it's a lot of getting reduced by armor each time, so while the actual amount of damage is above average, the number of matches where I think that this damage is going to directly contribute to a win are pretty slim, so for me this is just a 2-star. Alright, finally we're going to take a look at Deadpool's passive. So when we put tier 4s in Deadpool's passive, it increases the amount of healing he gets per negative effect from 10% max health to 15% max health. So For certain matchups, this can be a lot more or a lot less. Of course, it depends on how many debuffs he's actually receiving. But yeah, depending on the match, I find it very rare that this amount of healing is going to make a tremendous difference. Again, it can in certain matchups, but it's not that common. Generally, Deadpool's going to have some of the better survivability on the Hero Brawler team anyway, and so sometimes that healing is wasted or not necessary, or he's just going to take a big ability that's going to kill him anyway. So because I just find the extra 5% max health to be a pretty standard upgrade, although, again, if you keep trying to do the same matchups against like a supernatural team or an AIM team, it can make a difference, but generally for me this is just a 2-star. Alright, now we're going to take a look at Wolverine. So putting tier 4s in Wolverine special adds 10% piercing, and that's it. And that is not a lot of damage at all. This is a terrible upgrade, and it's a 1-star. Alright, now we'll take a look at Wolverine special. So putting tier 4s in Wolverine special adds 30% damage to the primary and 30% damage to all the chain targets, and it's going to go from 3 or 4 chain targets to always 4 chain targets. Now it does get a nice upgrade if Phoenix is on the team, but since we're assuming Phoenix is not part of the Hero Brawler team, that's it. So that amount of damage is not that much, and then what they've done with Wolverine's base damage is kept it kind of low because he applies bleeds, so this amount of damage is pretty irrelevant. So for me, this is a 1-star. Alright, now we're going to take a look at Wolverine's ultimate. So when you put tier 4s in Wolverine's ultimate, it adds 90% damage to the ability. So that's definitely above average. Now the interesting thing about Wolverine is that he has decent base sustain. He's definitely one of the healthier Hero Brawlers and one of the more likely to still be standing towards the end of a match. So while you get this ability kind of late, if things aren't going particularly well for your team and you need that kill late in the fight, adding an extra 90% damage to this nuke allows you to have a much better chance at just taking an enemy with a lot of health out of the fight right away, which is good, and yeah, it's pretty likely that you'll run into a situation like that. In addition, if Wolverine is below 50% health, which there's a fair chance that he might be because the Hero Brawler team doesn't have that much defense, he's also going to gain offense up, which means in reality you can be getting 135% more damage out of this ability, which is a lot. So while I don't think this is absolutely essential, I do think that it's very strong, so if you're running Wolverine on this team, for me this is a 3-star. Finally, we'll take a look at Wolverine's passive. If you put tier 4s in Wolverine's passive, it adds 5% healing on turn. And it does bring it up from 15% to 20%, and that is quite a bit. However, in my experience, firstly, it's a standard amount of extra health to be healing each turn, and secondly, Wolverine is almost always one of, if not the last man standing on a Hero Brawler team when the match is going poorly anyway. So while the extra healing might make him slightly tankier, again, he's usually plenty tanky, and the issue that the Hero Brawler team will have had if you run into that situation is that they didn't have enough upfront damage to take out the enemies before they were taken out themselves. So I don't often find that this amount of healing makes a significant difference, and it's, again, just the standard 5%, so for me, this is a 2-star. Alright, now let's take a look at Psylocke. So putting tier 4s in Psylocke's basic adds 50% damage, and that is just barely above average, but 50% has kind of become the new standard these days, so while you could make the case that this is like the lowest possible 3-star, for me this is very standard, this is just a 2-star. Alright, now we'll take a look at Psylocke's special. So putting tier 4s in her special adds 40% damage to the primary target and 40% damage to all the chain targets, and again, this is really standard. Now you're pretty likely to use this ability in the match because it also does the dispel, so you might get some value out of it there, but again, at the end of the day, it's just a very standard upgrade. For me, it's a 2-star. Alright, so now we're taking a look at Psylocke's ultimate. So on the X-Men team, Psylocke's ultimate gets decent value out of T4s, but on the Hero Brawler team, ultimately, you're removing all negative effects from an ally Wolverine if Wolverine is on the team, and you're adding 60% damage to the primary target. And so, because it's just 60% and a single target nuke, and Psylocke is not hitting that hard, for me this is just a 2-star. Alright, now we'll take a look at Psylocke's passive. So taking a look at Psylocke's passive, putting tier 4s in this ability, it takes her from a 50% chance to get evade and counter on spawn to a 100% chance to gain evade and counter on spawn. So there's a little bit to unpack about this. The first is 50% of the time, this upgrade is going to do absolutely nothing because she would have had evade and counter on spawn anyway. So then it's really a matter of how much is that evade and counter going to help? And her counter does not hit that hard, and because it's on spawn, it's going to happen pretty early in the fight, so it's very rarely going to make a significant difference who you were trying to attack based on that tiny little bit of extra counter damage, so it's very rarely going to be the difference between a kill or not. And then as for the evade, it is possible on turn 1 she can evade a big ability, but most of the time it's going to be just evading some splash damage or a chain, which will help her survivability a little bit, but again, the Brawler team, they're kind of all in on their offense. You don't want to worry too much about upgrading some of their more defensive abilities, because even if you put as many T4s as you can into their survivability, they really are all about the mantra that the best defense is a good offense. If they can just kill the opponents quickly, then they're going to be safe, and that's just really how they operate. So because this is a bit more defensive based, even though it's not a bad upgrade, I don't think there are going to be that many instances where this really makes the difference for the team, so for me this is just a 2-star. Now we'll take a look at America Chavez. So first we'll take a look at her basic. So putting tier 4s in America's basic adds 50% damage to the primary target. So again, 50% damage, it kind of depends on which character it's on, because it's kind of right at the line of what is or isn't an average upgrade, and she certainly hits harder than most, so I kind of lean towards it being slightly above average. But then there's the fact that her basic applies defense down, and there are plenty of instances where it actually makes sense to use her basic over another ability. For example, sometimes I'll use her basic instead of her ultimate because I'd rather have the defense down on the target, because of the people who are going to follow up on that attack, it will enable them to kill that target. So because you tend to use her basic a bit more often than some of the other characters, for me, this is a 3-star. Alright, now we'll take a look at America Chavez's special. So putting tier 4s in this ability adds 50% damage to the primary target, and then an additional 25% damage to the primary target per hero brawler ally. So assuming that you're running a full team of hero brawlers, this is going to add another 100% damage, which means for a single T4, you're adding 150% damage to a single target nuke. This is a really big ability, and it hits really, really hard. And because, again, this team is all about having a really strong opening barrage and just taking people out as quickly as they can, this is a huge, huge contributing factor to that strategy. And so for me, this is a 4-star. All right, now we're taking a look at America Chavez's ultimate. So putting tier 4s in this ability adds 80% damage. And I was kind of on the fence about this one because 80% damage is a really, really big damage increase on this ability. However, a lot of times you actually end up using it on a different target than one that you're trying to kill as quickly as possible. So for example, what I mean by that is if I'm facing a defender's team, even though I'll have someone on the ropes, I might switch targets to Luke Cage and use this ability to make sure that if I'm not going to have a dispel for Luke Cage's taunt, that I'm going to dispel his defense up and his death proof. So I'm not going to get all the value out of the extra damage, but I do get the dispel that makes it easier to either have Captain Marvel dispel Luke Cage or have someone else hit him, but he won't have defense up and we can kill him quicker. So while I like this damage upgrade, I don't think it's essential because a lot of times I'll use this ability for the dispel and not for the damage. So for me, it's a 3-star. Now we'll take a look at America Chavez's passive. So putting tier 4s in her passive gives her an extra 10% max health, as well as an extra 10% max health to all hero brawlers. So fully maxed hero brawlers towards endgame, this is going to add anywhere between 15 and 20,000 health on average, and that amount of health can absolutely be the difference between surviving an ability or not surviving an ability. So because for a single upgrade you can essentially give every character on the team the ability to take at least one more hit, for me, this is a 4-star. Alright, now we're going to take a look at Captain Marvel. So taking a look at Captain Marvel's basic, putting tier 4s in this ability adds 40% damage to the primary and 40% damage to the chain target. So generally speaking, this is a pretty average upgrade. The one thing to consider is if you're using this while in binary, you are going to get an additional 25% damage out of it, but again, you end up not using her basic that much, and even if you end up using her basic a lot, it's still only 40% damage. It's not revolutionary, so you could absolutely make the case that this is a 3-star ability, but considering that, again, a lot of the hero brawler matches are decided pretty early on, often before she even uses her basic, for me, this is just a 2-star. Alright, now we're going to take a look at Captain Marvel's special. So putting tier 4s in this ability adds 90% damage to the primary target. And I was really on the fence about whether this is a 3 or a 4-star because 90% damage is a lot. You can use this ability right away, and this team is all about their upfront damage, so there are plenty of instances where this upgrade makes a huge difference. You almost always are in binary when you use this ability, so you're even getting the extra 25% damage from that. So it's just really, really good. If you put T4s in this, it's definitely not a waste. However, a lot of times I will use this ability for its dispel and not for the damage. So for instance, I might use this ability on Luke Cage to remove his taunt so I can go back to hitting another member of his team. And so I'm not getting amazing value out of that extra damage there because it's not on a target that I'm trying to burn down with priority. So again, I was on the fence about this one. You could certainly make the case that this is a 4-star, but for me, because a lot of times I tend to use this on a target that I'm not trying to kill right away, for me it's a 3-star. Alright, now we'll take a look at Captain Marvel's ultimate. So putting tier 4s in this ability adds 100% damage, and it's pretty tremendous, firstly because it's essentially unavoidable. It says that it can't be dodged, but she's going to remove any debuffs on her, so what would make her miss a blind, she's going to remove anyway. So this is an unavoidable nuke that gains 100% damage, and she's going to go into binary before she uses it, which is going to mean another 25% increased damage on this ability. So it just does so much damage, and it is one of the core abilities that allows this team to just blow people up right away out the gate. So for me, this is an easy 4-star. And finally, we'll take a look at Captain Marvel's passive. Putting tier 4s in this ability improves her healing from 10% on turn to 20% on turn. And that is a tremendous amount of extra health. While I try not to put too many defensive abilities worth of T4s on this team because defense is really not where they focus, there are a couple characters who you can kind of count on to sustain the fight and be a major threat as the fight goes on. And I found that putting this upgrade into Captain Marvel allows her to sustain to pretty much always be one of the last members standing. And having Captain Marvel as one of the last members standing allows her to do some incredible cleanup work. In addition, because the primary use for this team in war tends to be on war defense, that extra healing makes her that much more of a nightmare if you have a really strong Captain Marvel. So because it's just so much healing, for me, this is a 4-star. Alright, now we'll take a look at Miss Marvel. So looking at Miss Marvel's basic, at first glance, the basic does not seem that important. It seems to only add 20% damage to her basic. But again, this is misleading because that value does not necessarily translate to the character's assist. Her assist is actually going to gain 29% damage and 2% piercing. However, both of those things are kind of secondary to the fact that you are going to be experiencing so many Miss Marvel assists that almost any damage improvement is going to be justified here because she is assisting typically 4 times per round of turns for your characters on the Hero Brawler team. So it ends up amounting to a lot more damage. So for me, this was just a no-brainer, hands down, 4-star. Alright, now we'll take a look at Miss Marvel's special. So putting tier 4s in Miss Marvel's special adds 3,000 additional health and healing, and that's it. So this is not great. This is on the low end of a 2-star, like it's almost a 1-star, but because there's some other abilities on other characters that only heal like 500 or 1,000, I guess this is better than those, but this is not a good upgrade, especially late game. That's a very insignificant amount of health, so for me, this is barely a 2-star. Alright, now we'll take a look at Miss Marvel's ultimate. So putting tier 4s in Miss Marvel's ultimate adds 20% damage to all targets, and it goes from 40% chance to a 60% chance to generate 1 ability energy to a random hero based on how many targets were hit. So at first glance, this sounds like a pretty good upgrade, and it's definitely not a bad upgrade. However, it's not quite as good as it seems. That extra damage on the AoE is very marginal, and then it's still just a chance to generate energy, and that energy goes to a random hero, and a lot of times you use this on turn 1, where a lot of characters already have the ability energy that they need. So there are a couple instances where this can make a significant difference, like this ability giving energy to Captain Marvel can keep her in binary for an extra turn or something like that, but it's pretty slim. So while it's definitely not a bad upgrade, for me, it's not quite essential, so for me, this is a 3-star. And finally, taking a look at Miss Marvel's passive, putting tier 4s in this ability takes her from 80% chance to gain assist now on a Hero Brawler's turn to 100%. And for me, this one's kind of a no-brainer at that point. The entire team is kind of built around this passive ability and getting those assists, and having those assists be guaranteed is very, very important. An assist not happening, you're missing out on something like 15 to 20,000 damage on a maxed out Miss Marvel. So just having that every single time, never missing out on it, is a tremendous amount of damage gained. So for me, this is an absolute no-brainer, tier 4, definite 4-star, and should probably be your first upgrade. So there you have it, my picks for the best tier 4 upgrades for the Hero Brawler team. So I want to give a shout out to Vet for a terrific job editing this video. And a fun fact, I cannot stop burping. During the recording of this video, I must have burped like 100 times. So what I'm gonna have Vet do is edit together a supercut of all the times during this video that I burped and frustrated myself, and I'll make this offer to you guys. If this video gets like 15,000 views in the first week, I will release a supercut of all the times I burped during this recording and pissed myself off. Otherwise, thank you very much for checking it out. There will be a Power Core giveaway on this video, so in the comments below, let me know what Hero Brawler team you're running and how it's working for you. Otherwise, thank you very much for checking it out. I will have a new video for you guys tomorrow. Until then, peace!